And good afternoon, I'm Tracy Sinclair, and we are coming to you from our digital news desk. Of course, with me, political reporter Will Courtney. Big election day yesterday.
Very big.
Some expected results.
Yep.
Some unexpected
Absolutely.
results. And we want to talk a little bit about that. Will and I were able to see some of the results last night after the late edition, but they actually kept counting until almost 2 this morning.
I think that sounds right to me. When we were speaking last night, it was about 11 o'clock, we were getting a little bit close to midnight. I think that was about 70% of the results in. When I last checked, it's 93% of precincts accounted for. Trying to get a better idea of what precincts there are left. When I last checked, there was some southeast and interior and north Alaska.
There are a couple, the statewide races still showing about 80% of the votes are in.
Yeah.
And we know, this is expected at this time, that there will be either mail-in ballots, ballots that just haven't reached the voting central area yet. So which race would you like to start
Well, let's start with governor. I think it's one that, a lot of Alaskans in particular have been watching as we get closer and closer to this race. We're trying to get that up for you right now, but I'll kind of just briefly explain the graphic that we're looking at, which is Jonathan Christ-Tompkins, a former Sitka lawmaker, is in the lead, and he's maintained that lead for essentially the entire time that ballots have been counted. He's currently at 21% of the ballot with 28,300 votes for the Sitka representative, and that's pretty significant. Right behind him is Tom Begich, former Senate Minority Leader. We've been following him closely, and that's two Democrats. Two Democrats are leading the race. Tracy, I remember we talked about this when we were having that discussion last evening. It's not necessarily surprising that we're seeing the top Democrats in the race because, if you're a Democratic voter, you didn't have a lot of options when it came to Democrats. You had two in the governor's race versus 12, count them, 12 Republicans running for governor. There were also 3 independents, including one former governor, Bill Walker. So in the top 4, because again, Alaska's picks are a top 4 primary election, we have 2 Republicans also being able to eke out of the field, and that's Bernadette Wilson, who I believe is about 10% of the vote, followed by former Anchorage Mayor Dave Bronson. Again, those are both Republicans, definitely right-leaning Republicans too, very, very right-leaning, very entrenched in their in conservative belief for the state of Alaska. So that's the governor's race, and again, we're trying to get the graphics not working right now, but
the wonders of technology. It works every time I do it until, of course, we come over here. We'll talk for just a second as I'm restarting this computer, and hopefully that will bring it back up very quickly. One of the things we were talking about is, we said the top 4 right now, Jonathan Christ-Tompkins, Tom Begich, both sort of expected.
Yeah.
Bernadette Wilson, also sort of expected.
Yeah, I mean, it was a little bit of an open question if both Democrats were going to be able to make it through the primary for me, and I think that question that I had was very clearly answered by the state of Alaska, with both Democrats receiving more than 20% of the vote.
And then, as we said, in third place, Bernadette Wilson.
Yeah.
The one in fourth place.
Yeah.
Dave Bronson.
Yeah.
And
so Bernadette's been polling well. I will
Right.
just say Bernadette's been polling well. So somewhat of an expectation we had going into the evening to see whether, again, I don't always try to trust polling. It's one of those things where it's like it's right until it's wrong. So Wilson, she did ultimately eke through the top earning Republican. That is pretty significant. She did say very, very early in her campaign she would be dropping out of the race if she wasn't the top earning Republican. So this enables her to continue her race. She said she would drop out if she wasn't. Right behind her, Dave Bronson. And certainly that was an open question mark who that 4th pick was going to be, because a lot of the polling has been, very neck and neck when it comes to who that 4th Republican could be, or whether that was going to be Bill Walker, or whether that was going to be another independent, right? So that was an open question, and currently Dave Bronson in the lead. It is close. I believe the Associated Press hasn't even called for Wilson yet as well. So there's still, the Associated Press hasn't called for Wilson, but she does have a pretty safe lead, I would argue. Again, I'm not necessarily saying one way or the other at this point. So, yeah.
We obviously here we don't call races.
No.
We wait until the Associated Press makes that decision, and then you'll see a check mark by their name. Of course, now here in Alaska, because we have ranked choice voting for our general election, we will continue to see some of those fill in.
Yeah.
A lot of the races, the top 1 or 2, very clear, but once you get past that it becomes a lot
murky.
less clear.
Yeah.
And so we are, we'll just have to continue to watch for that and wait to see what the Associated Press does. And it's because once you get past, particularly in cases like the U.S. Senate race, the drop between the top 2 and the next person was so dramatic.
It's
but then
steep.
those other 15 candidates were very close together.
A couple hundred votes.
Right,
Yep.
and so as
If
you're
even.
going along, you're saying, okay, what is the likelihood that this person could move up? When we only have 80% of the vote in, what is the likelihood that we will see and I've got my buttons working, so
There we
I'm going to
go.
be able to bring these up now finally, and I apologize for the delay. There we are. This is our numbers for the Alaska governor's race. As we were talking about, those first 2, very close, but dramatically higher than Bernadette Wilson and Dave Bronson, which are also very close.
And again, and I mentioned it a moment ago, I want to make it pretty clear that these Republicans had a lot more competition for getting their base out. Again, 12 Republicans vying for the top seat versus Democrats. If you're a Democratic voter, you had 2 real picks, unless, again, you wanted to vote for an independent or if there was a Republican that spoke your name, right? So, and then as we go into these lower numbers, that's really going to be a big question for the future of the general election. Who are these voters going to back? Who will the Treg Taylor voters, and all 9,000 of them, who do they think they're going to back? Who does the Click Bishop supporters, the Adam Crump supporters, the the Bill Walker supporters, the Shelley Hughes supporters, who are they going to be backing as we approach the November election?
And the reason I bounced back here, because we were talking about how close these are.
Yeah.
We have Dave Bronson at 8%, that's 11,000 votes. Then you go to Treg Taylor, 1,300 vote difference. And we are looking at still about 20% of the vote coming in.
Yeah.
So that is the reason why we don't have those other top 2 positions selected just yet. We can also, just to see Bill Walker's, this has been pretty consistent since the beginning that he has been down in the 9th position. He's kind of, I would say, the most well-known name, except possibly Lisa McGuire, of these candidates that are farther down on the list. 17 candidates in this race. Obviously, these ones likely not to get through. We are probably looking at somewhere between Click Bishop all
Onwards.
the way to Dave
Yeah,
Bronson.
I think that's probably pretty safe to say. Again, you never know where these polls are going to come from, what these different, groups are saying. I remember watching the NBC. They have a really great graphic on their website kind of showing the regional data as well. And I did see that Click Bishop's getting a lot of traction in the interior and the north as well. So, and a lot of those votes are not in yet. So, there's still a possibility that there could be a spoiler in that regard, whether, there's, Treg Taylor and Click Bishop, they still have potential. They're not out of the race, and the AP, notably has not called it for Bernadette and Dave Bronson at this point.
Yes, and Dave Bronson, obviously a well-known name here in the Anchorage area as the former mayor, and I just don't have any knowledge of how familiar people are with him once you get out of the Anchorage metro area. Yeah,
he did launch his, and this was notable, something he said. I ran into him at not necessarily a rally, but there were a lot of supporters on the side of Seward Highway yesterday. I did run into him there. I will remember he launched his campaign in Fairbanks. His Lieutenant Governor pick is from Fairbanks, Josh Church, and that's a big part of, he is known for being in Anchorage, but he has a lot of roots in Fairbanks too. This campaign has a lot of roots in Fairbanks.
So that's where they're starting. Let's move on to one of the big race. At least at the, on a national level. For Alaskans, all of these are big races, but on a national level, this is the one that a lot of people have been interested in. Again, almost 80% of the vote in. This changed a little bit since I left last night, with a little bit more of the lead separating former Representative Mary Peltola and current incumbent Senator Dan Sullivan. to 42%.
Yeah, if you're Mary Peltola, you're really happy with these results right now. A 6% lead is pretty significant, 63,000 to his 56,000. I got statements for both of them. Peltola attributing her win to Alaskans, looking for, change not only in the system. Certainly, if you're a challenger, you are arguing that you are going to be the change. But also a big campaign statement has always been to fix the rig system, which she's calling, the state of DC and everything moving forward. And we're seeing somewhat of that nationally too. As for Dan Sullivan, he said that he kept his argument, his campaign's argument is that he kept Peltola less than 51% of the vote, and that is pretty significant. As we talk about a ranked choice voting election, that could go into the second round pick, and then what does that look like after that? Certainly, ranked choice voting somewhat controversial in the state, and it'll be up for it'll be on the ballot come November. I know there was a lot of questions. Our Lauren Maxwell was doing a lot of great reporting. A lot of people asking, like, where is the ranked choice voting? This is not the ballot proposition this year. There was a ballot proposition on establishing campaign contribution limits. The ranked choice voting will be in November.
We'll be on that. And we will just take a quick look down at some of the other people running in this race. There are a total of 16 candidates in the U.S. Senate race. And really, you're looking at, when you go down through these numbers, you've got 0% is what they're registering because they are below that 1%. And I think a lot of that is just because there's so much focus and so much energy on those top two. And then as we were talking about the space between the second position and the third position, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
40%.
And let's talk about that third position, Tracy, because I'm seeing double right now. Daniel Sullivan is looking like he will make his way over to the November ballot. Of course, Daniel Sullivan making headlines. He is, the candidate that does not have a party attached to his name, and that's been somewhat controversial. The Elections Division has, at best, struggled to explain why they have reached that decision. I've had to reach out to get statements and public records, and they have openly tried to not answer my questions of a very simple question: why doesn't he have a party on the ballot? So he is looking like he will advance into the November election. Whether he will or won't is still something that I am curious about. I did reach out to him for comment today. Now, as a note, he has never spoken to me before. I went to his house to try and get the chance to speak with him, and he did not want to talk to me. So that is something that we'll be watching closely. Does he want to keep running? What's next for his campaign? Again, he runs a very, I don't even know how, like a very, very low salience campaign, I'll kind of say, where his only campaign is his Facebook page, and he doesn't talk to at least us.
Right. And we do point out that while there was no party on the ballot, he is a registered Republican, from what we understand. So the Associated Press does identify him as a Republican, even though on the ballot there was no actual party listed for him there. And one of the other things that we talked a little bit about last night is how many of those 3,200 votes
for Dan
J. Sullivan would be
serious
confusion. A serious vote, because there are people that actually do want to vote for him, and how many people thought this is funny. Because Alaskans, we do elect one of the is this no, it's the next race I was talking about, because we do have another one of those kind of sort of questionable people on the ballot coming up in the next race. So that's a question that we just don't know. Are these real votes? Are they confused votes? Or are they votes that people just said, I'm going to do this because isn't this funny? Yeah,
and it's funny you mentioned that, because I remember we were talking here last night and I said I'm going to pull up my crystal ball for a little bit. I can just kind of see the future on this one, and I ultimately ended up being right, and I was pretty reassured on that. But we have been the statement from National Conservative Republicans and the senator himself has always been that people might get confused, right? People might vote for the wrong Sullivan on accident, and I've already seen those attacks and those claims against the Petersburg Dan Sullivan. Now, again, there is a serious question to be asked. Was he just in it to confuse people. That's been the crux of the legal argument, why it went upwards to the state Supreme Court, all these different question marks, and ultimately how we approach this place where the lieutenant governor said the decision was made to maximize differentiation between the two, how they look different, why he doesn't have a party on the ballot. But I do know for a fact, when I went to Petersburg, I spoke to a lot of people. There's additional reporting since I've went as well. And people do want to support him. I can speak to his neighbors at least. I've met several people who said, like, this is my guy. He agrees with what I agree with. He's my neighbor. I trust him. All this different stuff. But certainly, we're looking at it from a very micro level on this campaign. Even though he does look to make it through, I mean, that is a very small percentage of the vote, and not a vote that is, at least we're looking at these results, not something that could decide the election.
And then, yes, even if those were added to Senator Dan Sullivan's race, if they were all confused votes, he still puts him below Mary Peltola by about 4,000 votes. But still, not an insignificant thing when you are very close in these. Let's go ahead and look at the House race, because then this, again, has some interesting things going on. Nick Begich, not really surprised that he is in the lead with 46% at this point. Bill Hill,
challenger, an independent Alaska Native gentleman, commercial fisherman, all these different things. Yeah,
so he is running in second, and again, no real definition for who is in third and fourth. Matt Schultz is in that third position. He dropped out of the race before the primary, but was too late. His name was already on the ballot. So people voted for him despite the fact that he was not running. Yeah. And then it is that fourth one that is so interesting.
Very interesting. Eric Hafner. Not the first time Alaskans have seen that name, despite the man never stepping foot in this state, and that is because he is a federal inmate who the court has already decided in a previous court decision that he's allowed to stay on the ballot, but he cannot win. He cannot attain the office because he's a federal inmate.
And you have to physically be in the state on the day that you are put in office. Yeah. And unlikely to happen.
Certainly.
As a federal inmate. So yeah, just sort of an interesting situation there. And the question is, with Matt Schultz gone, it looks like at this point it would be John Williams moving up, but again, very close to Clay Strickland. And we're still 20% of the vote. A similar situation to those other two races. Your top two are quite...
heavy lead.
Heavy lead, heavy majority of the votes, and then you drop down to 8%, 3%, and now we're down into 2% and 1%.
And certainly the comparison with those two races, Senate and House, compared to governor, is just the amount of money that's also getting flooded in for these races. I remember Bill Hill receiving $750,000 in this most recent batch of earnings. Nick Begich, $1.1 million, and then Matt Schultz, $250,000. That's a big part of why he dropped out. That, and he also said support was lacking.
So turning to one of we did have one ballot measure on the primary, which I found odd. I don't really remember seeing ballot measures on the primary that often. So this was a little unusual. Of course, this was not the ranked choice voting. That one will be on the November ballot. This one is a pretty firm answer. Yeah.
71% of Alaskans, at least who voted in this primary, say that there should be campaign contribution limits. That's after, I believe, a federal court ultimately decided that the existing state law for campaign contribution limits was unconstitutionally low. So now we have new campaign contribution limits that, at least if these results are to be, expected, which, I mean, you just look at them, they're very, very clear, that we'll have new campaign contribution limits. I know we have a report on our website and our mobile app more about what those campaign contribution limits themselves are, but it does differentiate between individuals and groups and how much they can donate. I know for an individual, for a candidate, if you want to donate to a candidate, the new threshold is $2,000. It's still a lot of money. It is certainly less than unlimited, but $2,000 is now the new campaign contribution limit for individuals when this is expected to go into law.
And this was, this is the deciding vote on this. This is not showing up on the November ballot.
That's it.
So this was the deciding vote. Shall we go through a couple of the...
Sure, let's go into a couple, and if you want to kind of explain why we're looking at these ones opposed to, there's 52 total races, including the ones we just looked at. We won't go into all 40 state House and state Senate. But Tracy, why don't you explain why we're looking at these ones?
Yeah, so these ones that we're talking about here, these next 4 races, and then there'll be one other that we grab, are specifically the races that have 4 or more candidates. Once you get for the rest of the House seats after we get through District S in the state Senate, all of the other races have 4 or fewer candidates, which, because we have ranked choice voting, that means they will all go through.
Yeah.
So I'll leave this up for a little bit and people can see where their candidate is, but specifically, they're already going through.
Yeah.
They're going to be in that race in November. But there are a couple of races that have more than 4 candidates, and one of them is the State House District 23.
This is an Eagle River. Yep.
Jamie Allard.
Allard. Yeah, Jamie Allard. This is an Eagle River race, one that is pretty interesting. Jamie Allard, known for being a little bit more outspoken, a little bit more of a firebrand conservative in the state legislature, former Anchorage Assembly member as well, I believe. And yeah, I mean, she has a very healthy lead. It is, I mentioned this last night as well, it is certainly interesting to see the disparity between the votes for, these smaller districts compared to the statewide. So, I mean, even though it's 40%, that's only 300 votes. And when we look to the November election, right, there is expected to be a lot more turnout for a general election versus a primary. So, what does that look like? If you're Jamie Allard, I don't think you're sweating by these numbers. I mean, you have a very comfortable lead at this point, but certainly going to be interesting to see if things change or if things stay what we're looking like when it comes to the general election.
And then District 30 in a similar situation, but much closer relation here between Kevin McCabe, who is the Republican incumbent, and Sandra Loomis, who is the Democratic challenger. Yeah,
and Kevin McCabe out of Big Lake over in the Mat-Su Valley, I believe. And yeah, I mean, this is a race that certainly is interesting. These are tighter margins than what we were just looking at with Jamie Allard. Tracy, why don't you show us what the other so Mike Alexander not making enough votes to make it through, 178 votes, and that's actually doesn't look like it's a super big margin that could decide the race or not, but it could tighten the race. Whoever his voters are, whether they're going to back, they could certainly influence. And again, the big caveat: this is the primary, right? So how many people are turning out for the primary versus the general election?
And then, of course, once we start ranking, if you don't get your first choice, who's your second?
Yeah.
And those, of course, will be all sorts of issues that we deal with. This is interesting in that the incumbent, Garrett Nelson, is currently not in the lead. A different Republican, Steve Menard, is kind of handily taking the lead.
Yeah, that is a safe percentage. That is certainly, you are very, very comfortable if you are Steve Menard. I'll point this out because I think it's very important. Garrett Nelson is a new legislator and one that hasn't won an election yet. He was appointed by the governor of Alaska after the current House member was promoted to the Senate. It was either Kathy Tilton or George Rauscher. I'm not sure which one it was off the top of my head. They both ascended to the Senate, leaving their House seats open. And Garrett Nelson, currently holding that seat, currently is not looking very hot to keep that seat. Tracy, why don't you show us what the percentage is for those beneath? So about 6% combined. If you go up, is that a margin that's not enough? So, I mean, Garrett Nelson's going to have to rally certainly his base, get more people out to the general election if he hopes to keep his seat. But Steve Menard, very, very comfortable lead. And again, this is the Mat-Su Valley.
And then the one Senate seat that has more. This changed from last night.
Yeah, this was very different from last night.
Last night, Bryce Edgman was not in the lead, but now, as of this morning, with 71% of the vote in.
Yeah, and this is a Western Alaska Senate seat. Bryce Edgman, the current House Speaker from Dillingham. This is the seat that was held by the longest sitting lawmaker, Senator Lyman Hoffman, again from Bethel, very influential lawmaker, has been in office for a significant amount of time, chair of the Senate Finance Committee, a very prestigious chair, and a very prestigious committee as well. So Bryce Edgman, by all intents and measures, he is, a very known politician, and he is certainly expected to keep this seat, or not keep, but earn the promotion to the Senate. But we'll have to watch closely, because when these results were coming in, he was not favored to win at first. And this is, again, from Western Alaska, and the margins are a little bit different there.
The one other race that I did want to bring up that had multiple, you see just a few of these going through as I click down to I didn't bring it up. 30, don't have it on my list, unfortunately. But yeah, so we do have a number of interesting races. As I said, there are so many that we're not going to sit and go through them as we did last night. We did have a long conversation about that. But what we'll do is we will go ahead and put up our auto scroll so that we can leave these up for a little bit and you can see where your current candidate is. Before we get to all of that, what do you see going forward? Anything that you're looking forward to in these next 2.5 months, basically?
Yeah, well, I think the big question immediately is going to be who ultimately stays in the race, especially looking at that governor's race where it's very, very contentious. Are both Democrats going to stay in? Are both Republicans going to stay in? I mean, that could very well change the nature of that race. Will it split their electorate? Will it not split their electorate? Who are the parties going to back? And of course, we have a term-limited governor too, Governor Mike Dunleavy. You know, of these 4 that he's looking at, I'm particularly thinking he would endorse a Republican as a Republican, Bernadette Wilson and Dave Bronson. Is he going to back either of those 2? You know, the President Donald Trump has stayed out of this race as well. He has not endorsed either or any of these candidates. Likely a safe bet, likely one I would expect the governor also making with, again, 12 Republicans, not sure who's going to be the top seat. So, I mean, those 2 people I'm particularly watching closely. I would expect, likely the president would weigh in on Alaska's governor's race. I wouldn't see why he shouldn't, especially if he wants more Republicans in the country who are succeeding elected office. But also the governor. Who is the governor going to back? It's one of those open questions. So I have a lot of those questions about what now the nature of the race looks like going into November.
Well, because that is also, I guess we could call it a little bit of a strategy. I know that with ranked choice voting, particularly after that first round that we did this, a lot of some of the candidates started to say, as Bernadette Wilson said to you, that if she is not in the first place, she would drop out of the race, basically to not confuse and not take votes away from someone else.
And then somewhat of a referendum on ranked choice voting. You know, Bronson and Wilson both very anti the ranked choice voting system.
Yeah, and one of the ways that, if you'd like to hear some of those interviews, Will was able to do 15
of the 17.
15 of the 17 candidates. He was able to sit down and do long-form interviews with those gubernatorial candidates. They are on our website. They're on the free streaming platforms on Amazon Fire, Apple TV, and Roku. And even though voting is over for this round, it is still a way for you to hear from these candidates and figure out, maybe get an idea of who you might be leaning toward if maybe you didn't vote, or maybe you the person you voted for didn't end up in those final 4.
Yeah, and I mean, listen, like if you didn't vote as well, you know, there's still the general election. I've been saying it this whole broadcast. It gets higher turnout because people feel like their vote matters. I will argue very passionately that your vote definitely matters in the primary election. That's how we're talking about these results right now, but certainly that general election vote itself, you can feel powerful because you press that and that person becomes an elected official if they get the most votes.
Right, you actually see that. Now we do, as we said, we've got about 80% of the vote in. We do expect to see some additional results over the next several days. We'll continue to update that on our website. And if there's a significant change, of course, we'll come back here. But thank you very much.
Of course,
we appreciate you jumping on and doing this because an intense situation. We've got a lot of really high value races and some getting national attention that we will continue to follow as well. As I said, I'm going to leave this up for a little bit. We'll let it scroll through a couple of times so you can see the top 4 vote getters in all of these races. And we will be back, as we said, with any more information. Keep it watching to Alaska's News Source and alaskasnewssource.com.